Hello, health champions. Almost every doctor, nutritionist, and your grandmother agrees on one thing: eat your vegetables. But here's what almost nobody actually tells you: why. Not the surface level reason, not the poetic reason. The real biological reason that changes the way you think about food entirely. Today, that's exactly what we're going to cover. We're going to walk through 10 categories of vegetables, understand their carbohydrate content, and most importantly, understand what they're actually doing deep inside your body. Because once you truly get that, eating well stops being a chore and starts being obvious. Let's also address something right away. There is a lot of confusing content out there about vegetables. Claims like superheroes that clean your arteries, and heart-loving nutrients that swoop in like caped crusaders. It sounds great. It's kind of poetic, but it doesn't actually explain anything useful. And here is the real problem with that kind of thinking. When we don't understand the true mechanism, we can't make genuinely informed decisions. We end up treating food like medication, swapping pills for plants, but never actually changing our understanding of how the body works or what's really causing the problem. So today, we're going to change that completely. Category number 1 is leafy greens. This includes spinach, kale, Swiss chard, arugula, and all varieties of lettuce. These are among the lowest carbohydrate foods on the planet. Kale sits slightly higher on the carb scale than the others, but you would have to eat an enormous amount of it to consume too many carbohydrates in a sitting. The low carbohydrate content of leafy greens is one of the reasons they're so valuable, and we'll come back to exactly why that matters in just a moment. Category number 2 is cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and bok choy all fall into this group. Again, very low in carbohydrates across the board. Throughout this video, whenever I mention carb counts, I'm referring to net carbohydrates, meaning we subtract the fiber content, because fiber is not broken down and absorbed by the body the way regular carbohydrates are. That distinction is important, and we'll return to it because it's actually at the heart of why vegetables work the way they do. Now, before we go any further, let's deal with the biggest misconception in nutrition when it comes to vegetables. The idea that heart disease happens because arteries get dirty and that vegetables clean them is a dramatic oversimplification, one that actually keeps people from understanding what's truly happening. Heart disease and cardiovascular disease broadly comes down to 3 core factors: genetics, chronic low-grade inflammation, and oxidative stress. Those are the real drivers. And beyond genetics, what drives chronic inflammation and oxidative stress is processed food, excess sugar, refined carbohydrates, and industrial seed oils. These are the things that trigger insulin resistance, chronically elevated blood sugar, excess fat storage, metabolic syndrome, and eventually type 2 diabetes and heart disease. That is the real mechanism. So if vegetables don't literally clean your arteries like a scrub brush, why should you eat them? The answer is actually more useful and more interesting than any poetic description could ever capture. The first and most practical reason is replacement. If your plate is full of fresh vegetables, it can't also be full of the things that are causing the problem. Eating more vegetables naturally pushes out processed food, refined carbohydrates, and seed oils. You're not treating a symptom, you're removing the cause of the problem. Now let's talk about what's actually inside vegetables, because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. There are 2 broad categories of nutrients we typically talk about. The first is micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. Vegetables do contain solid amounts of these, but they're not uniquely superior in this area. Meat, fish, eggs, nuts, and seeds also provide excellent vitamin and mineral profiles, and many micronutrients from animal sources are actually more bioavailable, meaning the body absorbs and uses them more efficiently. The second category is macronutrients, fat, protein, and carbohydrate. Vegetables have far less of these than animal foods, so that's not where their unique power lies either. So what makes vegetables truly irreplaceable? Here's the part that almost nobody explains clearly. Vegetables are uniquely valuable because of what they contain that technically isn't a nutrient in the traditional sense at all. We call these non-nutrients, and they include fiber and a vast class of compounds called phytochemicals. These things are generally not absorbed into the bloodstream in any significant amount. They travel through your digestive system and interact almost entirely with what lives inside your gut. And what lives inside your gut may be the most important thing your body contains that you've never thought much about. Right now, living inside your digestive tract, you have approximately 40 trillion bacteria. They're distributed across a surface area roughly the size of an average house, about 3,000 square feet of inner landscape where these microorganisms live, interact, and carry out functions that affect virtually every system in your body. These bacteria interact with your immune system, your hormonal balance, your brain chemistry, and your inflammatory pathways. Scientists have come to recognize this entire ecosystem, your gut microbiome, as a separate organ in its own right, just as important as your liver, your lungs, or your heart. That is not an exaggeration. That is where the science has arrived. So what do fiber and phytochemicals actually do for this organ? Let's start with fiber. Fiber is a form of carbohydrate that human digestive enzymes simply cannot break down. The difference between a digestible carbohydrate and fiber is essentially a slight twist in the molecular shape, one that our enzymes aren't built to handle. But certain bacteria in our gut can handle it. Those bacteria ferment fiber, use it as their food source, and in doing so produce compounds that regulate inflammation, support immune function, and maintain the health of the gut lining itself. Fiber's job is not just to add bulk and keep digestion moving. Its primary job is to feed the organisms living in your colon. But it doesn't stop with fiber. Vegetables also contain phytochemicals, compounds that plants produce as a form of natural self-defense. Think of it this way: a cactus uses thorns, a snake uses venom. Plants can't move, so instead they produce chemical compounds that keep away pests, fungi, mold, and harmful bacteria. So far, researchers have identified over 10,000 distinct phytochemicals in plants, and the number keeps growing. You may have come across some of their names: curcumin from turmeric, resveratrol from grapes, polyphenols from berries and dark chocolate. These are a tiny fraction of the picture. Here's what's critical to understand about phytochemicals. They are generally not absorbed into the body in any meaningful amount. Their bioavailability is very low. For a long time, this confused researchers. If the body barely absorbs them, how could they possibly do anything useful? But now we understand that they're not actually supposed to be absorbed into the bloodstream. Their primary job is to stay inside the digestive tract and interact with the microbiome, helping balance the ratio of beneficial versus harmful bacteria, and modulating the immune response from within the gut itself. Your gut contains both beneficial bacteria, called symbionts, and potentially harmful ones, called pathogens. The goal is never to eliminate all bacteria, it's to maintain the right balance between them. Phytochemicals help suppress the growth of harmful microbes, while creating conditions where beneficial bacteria can thrive. When both the bacteria and the host, meaning you, benefit from this relationship, that's called symbiosis. That balance is the foundation of a genuinely healthy gut. But here's the part of this story that not enough people talk about honestly. Because phytochemicals are plant defense compounds, essentially mild toxins designed to keep things away, some people do react to them. This reaction is called hypersensitivity, and it can show up as bloating, food intolerances, inflammation, or skin reactions. Whether you react depends largely on the current state of your gut microbiome. If your gut is in a state called dysbiosis, meaning the bacterial balance is disrupted, you're far more likely to react to these plant compounds with inflammation, and that inflammation, in turn, damages the gut lining further and worsens the dysbiosis. It becomes a cycle that feeds itself. Breaking that cycle usually begins with identifying and temporarily eliminating the specific foods causing reactions. Once inflammation calms down, the next step is working to rebuild a healthy, diverse bacterial population. And that process looks different for everyone. This is why some people find remarkable relief on a carnivore diet, eating only animal products with no plant matter at all. When the gut is severely inflamed and reactive, removing all plants eliminates the trigger for those reactions. People feel better, sometimes dramatically, and that result is real and valid. But feeling better in the short term doesn't automatically mean that a carnivore diet is the ideal long-term approach for everyone. In many cases, what it means is that the gut needed time to calm down. After 30, 60, or 90 days of allowing that inflammation to settle, the smarter long-term goal is likely to begin slowly and carefully reintroducing plant diversity, with the aim of rebuilding a thriving, varied microbiome. Because a diverse microbiome is one of the strongest markers of long-term health that we currently know of. If you are working on restoring gut health, some practical tools include quality probiotics, fermented foods like yogurt and kefir, and stool DNA analysis tests that can give you a detailed map of which bacterial strains are present in your gut and which may be missing. This science is still developing, but it is advancing fast. And here's the most important conclusion from everything we've just covered. Once you understand that the goal is to nourish a diverse microbiome, the idea of ranking certain vegetables as superfoods and others as ordinary falls completely apart. The real goal isn't to find the single best vegetable and eat it every day. The real goal is to eat as many different types of vegetables as possible, rotating through as much variety as you can. Different plants provide different fibers and different phytochemicals, which feed different strains of bacteria. The greater the variety, the richer and more resilient your microbiome. Variety itself is the actual superfood. Category number 3 is nightshades. This group includes tomatoes, bell peppers, eggplant, and white potatoes. Most nightshades are low in carbohydrates and are excellent foods for people without sensitivities. However, nightshades contain proteins called lectins, which can irritate the gut lining in some people. Tomatoes are a nutritious, delicious food for most people, but others may find they trigger reactions, particularly those with existing gut inflammation or dysbiosis. White potatoes, beyond the lectin concern, are also considerably higher in carbohydrates compared to other vegetables in this list, which is worth noting if you're managing blood sugar or insulin levels. Category number 4 is alliums. Onions, garlic, leeks, shallots, and chives make up this category. These vegetables are particularly powerful for gut health because they're exceptionally rich in a compound called fructooligosaccharides, or FOS, a highly effective prebiotic that specifically feeds beneficial gut bacteria. FOS is actually sold as a standalone supplement because of how potent it is as a bacterial food source. However, if you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, commonly known as SIBO, alliums can cause significant bloating and gas because the FOS ends up feeding bacteria that have colonized in the wrong part of the digestive tract. Once again, the same food that is excellent for one person can be genuinely problematic for another, and the difference almost always comes back to the state of the gut. Category number 5 is root vegetables. These are vegetables that grow underground: carrots, turnips, parsnips, rutabaga, celery root, and sweet potato. Some of these, like turnips and rutabaga, are surprisingly low in net carbohydrates and work well even on a low-carb eating plan. Others, like sweet potato, are considerably higher and can disrupt blood sugar or kick you out of ketosis if you're actively working to stay there. If you're focused on reversing insulin resistance or managing diabetes, keeping to the single-digit net carb options in this category is the smarter move. Category number 6 is the squash family: zucchini, butternut squash, acorn squash, and pumpkin. Zucchini sits at the very low end of the carbohydrate scale and works in almost any dietary approach. The denser winter squashes like butternut and acorn are higher in carbohydrates and are best consumed in moderation if you're keeping carbs in check. Category number 7 is legumes. Foods that grow in pods: green beans, peas, lentils, edamame, and all varieties of beans. Green beans, where you eat the entire pod, behave almost like a regular water-rich vegetable and are low enough in net carbs to work comfortably in most eating styles. Lentils and black beans, on the other hand, are considerably higher in carbohydrates and are best treated as occasional rather than everyday foods if you're managing insulin levels. Legumes do provide meaningful amounts of fiber, which again is beneficial for the microbiome. Category number 8 is mushrooms. Technically, fungi rather than vegetables, but we eat them in the same culinary context. White button, portobello, shiitake, and many other varieties are very low in carbohydrates and contain unique bioactive compounds that support both immune function and gut health. Different mushroom varieties offer different benefits, so variety matters here just as it does with vegetables. Category number 9 is stalk vegetables: celery, asparagus, and rhubarb. These are among the lowest carbohydrate vegetables available and are entirely compatible with ketogenic or very low-carb eating. They also provide useful amounts of fiber for the microbiome. Category number 10 is a special group: foods we commonly call vegetables but that are technically botanically fruits. This includes avocado, olives, cucumbers, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, and coconut. Avocado is medium in total carbohydrates, but so rich in fiber that its net carbs are very low, and it provides an abundance of healthy fat alongside that. Berries are low in sugar compared to most fruits and are among the richest sources of phytochemicals and antioxidants available. Olives are similarly excellent, low in carbs and high in beneficial fats. One thing worth knowing about cucumbers: they contain lectins in the skin, which may be relevant if you're sensitive. And if you're transitioning back to plant foods after a period of carnivore or elimination eating, fruits and berries are generally a gentler starting point than vegetables with more complex defense compounds, because fruits actually benefit from being eaten and having their seeds spread, so they tend to contain fewer compounds that cause gut reactions. So let's bring it all together. Vegetables are not medications. They don't directly clean your arteries or lower your blood pressure like a drug, but they do something arguably more powerful. They help create the internal environment where your body can regulate itself, manage inflammation, and maintain the kind of cellular and systemic health that prevents chronic disease from developing in the first place. The real mechanism works like this. Fresh, whole vegetables replace processed foods that drive insulin resistance and systemic inflammation. Their low carbohydrate content means less blood sugar, less insulin, and less of the metabolic damage that builds over years of eating refined food. Their fiber and phytochemicals feed and diversify the gut microbiome, which regulates immune function, inflammatory pathways, brain chemistry, and far more than we yet fully understand. The goal is not to pick one superfood and eat it obsessively. The goal is variety, consistency, and understanding. Eat several cups of vegetables every day. Rotate through as many different types as you can manage. Pay attention to how your body responds because your gut is communicating with you through those responses. Adjust your carbohydrate intake based on your own metabolic health goals. And remember that every meal is an opportunity to either nourish or neglect the 40 trillion organisms living inside you. Organisms that, when they thrive, give you the best possible foundation for a long and healthy life. The next time someone asks you why you eat your vegetables, you now have a real answer. Not because mom told you to, not because they clean your blood vessels, but because a vast, complex, living ecosystem inside you depends on them. And when that ecosystem thrives, everything else tends to follow. If this helped you see your plate a little differently, I think you're going to love the next video. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you never miss a life-changing video. This video is for general educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical or nutritional advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare professional for guidance specific to your situation. Thanks for watching and take care of yourself.